What's up, world? We're here with the first ever ABG podcast, and I have the honor today of moderating and sitting in this conversation. We have Joshua Mays and Brandon Ruffin, two dynamic creatives who are both pioneering the Web3 and NFT space. They're going to tell us a little bit about some projects they're working on today, but I think just to start, we'll start off with some intros. So, Josh, we'll start with you. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name's Joshua Mays, and I'm a illustrator, designer, muralist, storyteller, and I've been deep into a storytelling project that I'm trying to pull into the Web3 space, and also, we'll be talking about that.
And then Brandon, you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been working on?
Sure, yeah. My name is Brandon Ruffin. I create multidisciplinary work on the rough draft, mainly known for right now these days for photography, which is odd because when I was younger, I couldn't even see photography as an art. Sort of had to mature into being a photographer, I guess. Just loving everything that's happening inside the NFT community. I love the tech. I've been involved with crypto since about 2014. I've been an artist my whole life, and so to conflate the two worlds just kind of came together very naturally. A friend of mine, Dave Krugen, who's an amazing photographer, was talking about the blockchain, and I was talking about the blockchain, and I was talking about like the financial side of it, and he was talking about the art side of it, and I was like, oh, all right, let me jump in, and I just got hooked from there. And I, as I built with the community more, I just really made some amazing friends and was able to work on some projects I thought were really just incredible. Joshua and I worked on a murals project where we did murals to the metaverse, where we were able to all collaborate inside the space in the fifth story of the Tribune Tower and take physical murals, 3D scan them into the crypto space, if you will, and make what I believe is like the first mural on the blockchain, definitely the first collaborative mural project on the blockchain. My own personal project was a photography collection of street photography called Moments in Solitude. I released on the Ethereum blockchain on Foundation. And that was an amazing experience. It was kind of a conversation about just loss, grief, the feelings of that had developed with myself and a lot of the sentiments from other people that I had been talking to over the last 2 years. We did like with the pandemic and a few other things. So that was a really amazing experience. It felt very intuitive to release that onto the blockchain and release that into as an NFT in just the ways that the NFT community sort of like everyone, the relationships that we've all built there. So those are just like projects I've been working on. I still have some more things kind of developing and just loving the space and all the opportunities that have been presented in front of us as we shift into this like Web3 space and moving away from Web2.
Joshua, what do you feel like what's pulling you in general towards the Web3 space? Like, kind of talking about some of these projects Brandon's doing. He's kind of like, we're all over the place with all these, potential opportunities.
Yeah.
What are some projects that you've seen or some ways that people have been, using the blockchain and Web3 to do some crazy creative shit?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's been about building this fictional city, Olgaruth. I brought that to you, as a project where we're going to, I'll rewind even further and just say that there was just a moment where I needed to dive into this world on the other side that I've been illustrating for years and years and years. And I like the concept of developing intellectual property for the sake of bringing value and building my brand and making the sale of originals and limited editions from my studio more realistic. That was really the plan, like really going and developing a project that we take to animation studios and streaming services and video game developers. And as I was building, since the beginning of the pandemic, as I was building out this fictional realm, at the top of 2021 is when like the NFT conversation really like blew up, and it was just like I can I can establish an economy within this. I can establish a real economy in this fictional place. And I can, instead of going to Netflix and proposing a project, with which they green light one season of it, and I have to wait to see if season 2 is going to get the green or red light.
Giving up rights and all the whole game that you
exactly
with these groups.
I could go on ahead and just fund it myself, and go full speed ahead on creating the whole series, and then ultimately they come to me with a proposal on, hey, since you have it all produced, let's just write you a check. So
which they love. That's like Netflix's bag. I'm currently doing something similar, but that is
stuff. Yeah.
You I'm sure you've been on all the YouTube, all the like, how do you sell something to Netflix, or how do you engage? And you find like these people who basically send it to them with a bow on top.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the way that they like it. And so that's a beautiful opportunity that you're.
So with that, yeah, we want to try to, I guess, communicate value to people watching and who are mystified by the concept of Web3, the concept of NFTs, So, I was hoping you're definitely more understood on what NFTs are, if you could eloquently break that down.
I'll try to be as eloquent as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, and so for context, I've been in the space. I first joined, I use like my Clubhouse birthday as like the time that I came into the NFT space, because I came to Clubhouse as a recommendation of that's where like these conversations were taking place.
Yes.
Right. And so December 2020 is when I, really, so I was like kind of interested, and I was learning about NFTs in like October 2020. But 2020 was a really, really trying year for me. I unfortunately lost my sister around that time, and so I was just kind of like in a haze. But it was it was this odd sort of like necessity. My sister passed in August. I had my youngest daughter in October, and then like I was in need of like things that didn't require me to like commit to being with people in person, right? Like I wanted to have like my own, but I was able to still sort of, I love to learn things. I love technology and I love art. And then I was able to also start to connect with other people who were like in the same boat. Yeah. And everybody had a rough 2020, whether you lost someone directly or a job directly or whatever. Like, and especially in the world of artists, I didn't solely rely on freelance work, but I enjoy freelance work. That was part of like my own sort of like things that make me mentally healthy, is to go out and do photography and create art. Like these are things I like to do as part of my chemistry, right? And so I also knew a lot of friends who were solely freelance. Yeah. And their worlds basically stopped. So a lot of us were coming to a space for many reasons. Yeah. NFTs being one of them, but also just a space where we could talk. Sure. And as we watched the rise of the sort of the audio social media hubs, we have your Clubhouse. We see what Twitter Space ended up becoming. Discord also has some similar things. Took me back to like being a teenager and hopping on AOL Messenger and running into these message boards, right? Like when I was a teenager, we didn't even have like MySpace, right? These were but our MySpace was the AOLs, right? Like you could you hop on Messenger, you can hop in these chat rooms, and you can hop into forum boards and things like that, which I feel like are the predecessors of Web3, where we have these spaces where people can kind of come through these like decentralized spaces where everyone can pull up, have a seat at the table, and have a conversation. Yeah. So December 2020, that's when I jumped into Clubhouse. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm able to hear people's voices. It's not the same as like interacting with a post or like going. And so there was this something I felt was very human, which was missing on your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your Twitters, or whatever. There's something very human about like being able to have a conversation with people. And then let alone you look at Clubhouse, where you can have a conversation with tons of people at a time. Twitter Space ultimately evolved into something a little bit more different, where it's like you can only have a certain amount of people on stage. You can talk, you have to rotate people in and out. Like this is a point of contention for many people running Twitter Spaces. But that was when I started to come into it, and I sort of got hooked. And I was like, okay, I want to learn everything there is to know about NFTs, right? Which is obviously, you start with what is an NFT. And so an NFT is a non-fungible token. And what that means is, if you look at a fungible token, one of the great examples is that if I was to borrow a $5 bill from you today, Josh, and go to Starbucks and buy a coffee, right? I wouldn't need to find that $5 bill and bring it back to you. Yeah. Because if I brought you another $5 bill, it would spend just the same, right? But if you had a $5 bill that was like a collectible, right, or it was signed by a president or something was very unique about it, like the number, like something about it just made it a one of a kind, right? I can't take that $5 bill from you, which may be worth, let's say that $5 bill is worth $100,000 for whatever reason. I can't take that $5 bill and bring it back to you and bring a random $5 bill back to you, right? That it doesn't have the same exchange because the one that you gave me is a one of one, or it's a limited, right? There's a scarce amount of this thing that exists. And so when you start to think about NFTs, you are taking things, you're minting them onto the blockchain, right? And if we take a step back, the blockchain is an immutable ledger, a digital ledger, where we can record and look at transactions that are occurring on a network of computers, sort of like verifying these things that are happening, right? We can all agree on them and say, yeah, like we trust this system, we trust this network, we trust this chain. And so the blockchain is a really wonderful technology that they've been able to build the sort of NFT community on top of, in the NFT market on top of. And currently, a lot of that is happening on the Ethereum blockchain, which I think Ethereum has risen to be what it is because from its very inception, the idea was we're going to make something that people can build things on top of. Not just a cryptocurrency that exists to necessarily solve one problem, or a cryptocurrency that we use like Bitcoin, where we can just exchange value, right? Like, hey, can I, instead of borrowing $5, let's go back some years ago, right? Let me borrow one Bitcoin. I want to pay for my coffee with that, right? But Ethereum being this thing that you can just build on top of. And so we look at Ethereum and a few other chains, Solana, Tezos, or a few others, that people have felt comfortable building these things on top of and being able to actually build a market on. And so the NFT market, most popularly right now, Ethereum is the chain that a lot of things are being put onto. But we take a painting, an illustration, a photo, and we can mint that onto the blockchain. We can make it now exist on the blockchain. And then if I want to sell it to somebody, then I can list it onto the blockchain, right? And I can tell them how much of this thing exists. So with my collection, Moments in Solitude, it was a one of one. So every image in that was a one of one. There was no, there were no addition pieces, right? So it wasn't a 1 of 5 photo, right? Every person who purchased one of those photos has the only photo that has the only version of that photo that will ever exist on the blockchain, And so a couple ways to skin the cat, right? Some people do sell editions. Some people, especially on the OpenSea market, we saw OpenSea was able to sort of design their interface where it was a lot cheaper and a lot simpler to list multiple editions of one thing, right? And so you could have a 1 of 20 or a 1 of 500 or 1 of 10,000, as we see like PFP projects, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, all right, or the Mutant Ape Yacht Club, or Doodles, or
explain PFP projects.
So PFPs, hopefully I get this right. PFP was like proof of purchase, right, or proof of. Originally, it was just like. It was like a verification, like you existed, you were real, right? It wasn't you were like a bot or something like that. And so now we have these things that's called PFP projects. PFP, obviously, people have like conflated it into profile picture because most of these projects we use is like our profile picture. Like if you look at my Twitter right now, I think I have a doodle. No, I have a dead fella up right now, right? And on my Instagram, I have like my doodle up, like I won't even call them blue chips, right? But they're my blue chips. These are the ones I speculate to be like projects that will sustain the market, right? If we like bring that back to the original like blue chip, and then the stock market, and we've now that language has been used in the NFT market. But if you look at like CryptoPunks, you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club, these are what we would consider blue chips, and these are just highly valuable projects that are able to sustain a bear market. They'll do well in a bull run. Where the market goes, like they will still hold their value fairly well, and so. Yeah, a lot of those were generative projects. So we talk about generative, we talk about projects that are able to be taken and maybe an illustrator draws a bunch of assets or completely randomized computer work, right? Where there's some coding involved and you're able to randomize an output for, sometimes it's 8,000, sometimes it's 10,000, sometimes it's a 5,000 piece project. But the idea is that an illustrator, an artist, or anyone really who has the ability to do this can create randomized versions of a thing, and that these things will also, because of the randomization, will also produce its own rarities, right? It'll create like something that's very common, like maybe a red hat can be super common, and then a gold hat. It's like there's only 5 gold hats that came out in this in the output of this thing, right? So those projects are interesting. They move away. They're art, right? Some people will say that they're not very artsy or not very artistic, or you can say like, well, I thought that the art in this project was really cool. Like I love the art for Deadfellas. I love the art for Doodles. And someone could say, well, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the art was so, or you could say it was fantastic, right? But where this also moves into is like these PFP projects, they border the line of collectible and they border the line of like art.
Sure.
It's not the same as what you'll produce, right? Like you can produce an illustration. It could be a one-of-one. I can just fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And I can want to like print that, put it on my wall or put it onto like a digital frame in my house, right? It's a true piece of art in a very traditional definition of the word. Now you can print out a Bored Ape, right? I can print out my doodle and hang it up, but it's more art and it's more relevant in context to what it is and like how it plays inside the space, right? Yeah. I may not just like look at a doodle, right, and go, ooh, like that's amazing. I want to print that up in my house.
I'm gonna ask you a question, I guess, on behalf of Joshua. So, like, one of the things that I think was really exciting about Joshua's Olgaruth idea when he brought that to me is, from what I'm seeing, I feel like there's really two main ways that people have been approaching like art when it comes to NFTs, and one is like the PFP collectible based projects, the Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, right? Like we're gonna do 10,000 tokens of yada yada, and that becomes like, really, you're going public like you would on the stock market, but you can go public with a cartoon and there can be, real retainable value that's attached, or maybe there's not. I've seen people do successful projects like that, or you can do the very like, I guess, standard like letter of authenticity. Like I've seen contemporary artists doing, I'm doing one piece and it's attached to one NFT that's attached to that piece. Like I've seen like what Sotheby's did with their auction and stuff. So for me, like, I'm excited to see that, like, I just found myself, I'm just like, which direction do you go? And where Joshua's project, I think, is really cool, is that it's rooted in his artwork that people know and have seen around. But also it's like creating a currency where people can sort of attack the best of both worlds, where we can have that collection. So, like, I guess my question to you is, do you have examples of other contemporary artists? Because I think that's what we're trying to do, is talk about like how artists are using this. Like we can obviously go into real estate and like crypto trading, but like we can talk about horse racing, whatever you want to talk about.
But I argue even like the real estate aspect, that is still going to conflate into art, like right, like for sure. Spaces where you're buying parcels, people are buying parcels because they're going to build stuff on top.
It's going to be galleries,
right? Yeah. And so it's like people are going to become the architects of that world. Someone's going to be building those buildings. Someone's going to be like hosting the party. Someone's going to be like right now we have people who are creating like these very visually exciting galleries to hang your work that you've collected in, right? So there's going to be a conflation in the art world, in the real estate world, where it's like so much now. I mean, you can argue the same thing here, right? Like, look at this building, right? And you look at what artists like Human have done here in creating like this visually stunning. This building is now an art piece,
right?
Yes. Whereas before it was like it was a warehouse, right? But if we go downtown, I love downtowns because a lot of them still have the markings from when architecture was looked at art, and there was story in the building, right? Mm-hmm. Like I remember going to this tour in downtown LA back when I was in college. It was for my girlfriend at the time, just for her class, but I was just like hanging around, and the person was telling us all the things about the different markings on the building and how these were like really intentional, right? So we can see a conflation with buildings and things that were things that will still do things inside of, but like the conflation of these buildings and
there's all these different economies, and art could be 100% part of each of them.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
But in regards to what Josh was doing, I think it's really it really is connected into what the spirit of the community is anyway. Like, we're world building. There's a departure happening from Web 2. Because we all realized Web 2 was very single serving, right? And a lot of us weren't able to take advantage of, nor were we empowered through Web 2. We're all just kind of trying to participate, right? And so my value inside Web 2 spaces was more so like, which organizations, which companies can I be involved with? Can I have?
It's about the brand.
Yeah, like what brand can I be validated by? Whose page can I be featured on? Who can I tag when I list this? Who was I working with? And I think when we see Web3, I feel like the people and artists are like really like clutching at the value being like, I determine my value and the community determines my value. And a lot of that is actually determined by how much I put into the community. right? Like how much world building am I doing? How much community building am I doing? That is one of the biggest indicators of value inside this space. And so I don't need Nike to, I don't need to do a shoot with Nike and be able to like tag them in a photo for people to go like, oh, like he's a dope photographer.
Yes.
I can do a collection like Moments in Solitude did really well. There's still pieces available. I sold a lot of those pieces, and I made a decent amount of money, right? So there were people. I said I have value as a photographer, as an artist, as a storyteller, and people looked at the work. They looked at me as the artist. They looked at how I was represented inside the space, and they agreed with that value that I said when they purchased those pieces. It wasn't because I was being auctioned by Sotheby's or because I was, being brought in as a featured photographer for Adidas or something like that. It was because they liked the brand that I am. They liked the person that I am. And they liked the work that I produced. And they saw value in me. And they saw value in the story I was trying to tell. And so I think there's a big difference in people approaching things that way versus us looking for like validation. Like, well, do I want to work with this photographer? Let's see who he's worked with. Oh, okay, he's worked with these brands. These are big brands.
Right.
They're not looking to build the draw from there.
Right.
They're more people are going to be looking at you. And so I think your project is great because it deals with that, like world building. Yeah. How can we create something for people to be immersed in? And there are similar things that exist. And I think that they're going to continue. There's going to be an explosion of these things, right? Sure. We even see like Robotos, which is a project by Pablo Stanley. Robotos is now going to, they have signed where they're going to be doing a show. They're going to do an animated show. They also have a game that's being built out. And there's a few other ones. I'm not the best with the gaming, some of the gaming projects, but there's one that I have in my mind right now and I can't think of the name, so I don't want to missay it, but it's done extremely well. And some of these things are like older, like they come from, I think like 2020 was like the time where technically if you're around the beginning of 2020, you're like you're like an NFT OG, which I think is kind of crazy. Yeah. Right. But there were things that existed before then. And some of these projects are like coming in before that. And I think, there's going to be a really incredible connection with that because people do want to be immersed in this. We're watching people sort of accept the road into the metaverse, which I think is incredible. I have like 2 kids, and one who is 9. She's been involved in like messing with the metaverse a lot longer than I have because she's on Roblox and stuff like that, right? So we are like learning to speak a language that kids already speak, but that everyone's going to be speaking in like the next 5 to 10 years.
I have an analogy for the blockchain that I've been working out, and just to try to, I guess, bring down to earth for anybody who's watching this and their head is spinning and they're still not really understanding what the blockchain is and why people are freaking out the way they are, why there's suddenly a rush of value, especially in the art perspective. And the analogy is like 3 particular devices. The first device is an infinitely long sheet of titanium. The second device is a laser that is able to etch all of our contracts, all of our agreements, and we decide that that's what we're going to do. And the third device is a camera that can zoom right to that agreement, right to that point of view. So I know a lot of people, when they think of why a piece of art on the blockchain is valuable, why, I can screenshot it and I can have it on my phone. I have it. Why is it valuable? And it's not about the art itself. It's about that point on the blockchain where it's marked. That point on that sheet of titanium 5 years ago that got marked, that we can access and say, no, this person owns it.
Because, it's the saying, like, if you look at the Mona Lisa is the Mona Lisa.
Yes. And
even if I take a picture of it and it's identical to what you see, I don't have the Mona Lisa.
Yes.
Right? I have a picture of the Mona Lisa. And so for we call them, the right-click savers. They would only have a picture of my picture. Right? Yes. They would have a picture of an asset that I own.
Exactly.
Right? And so I think part of the problem is that there's a conflation with NFT to art.
Yes.
That you can right-click on and save.
I actually saw that Twitter is going to start verifying your
NFT. They are. I'm sketchy on that. I'm not trying to talk bad about Twitter, but I don't
Yeah.
It's very, I haven't done it and I don't plan to do it for a while because in my opinion, it's very beta still.
Yeah.
And you can hack Twitter, you can hack Twitter accounts, which means if my wallet is connected to that, you can hack my things. Now, I mean, I also encourage everyone to back their stuff up or transfer things to, you know, it's like a ledger or something like that. Like, you know, but all the same, I'm very, very wary about connecting my wallet with these high price assets into something like Twitter. I feel the same way if it was Instagram, anybody. Like, I'm not there yet. But I have plenty of friends who've done it. Yeah. They haven't had any problems. But it's to me, I'm just like, man, I can't do it.
This is like, I guess, taking it a little bit different direction, and I want to dive like specifically into the Olgaruth project. When it comes to the contemporary, this is a conversation Josh and I've had a little bit. I think so much of the conversations around the non-metaversal art world is like talking about the structure of galleries and how that is sort of like dying off, or even like in music, like just like the idea of like managers is like, you don't need someone to connect.
The middleman.
Middlemen are going to have to become the middlemen.
So that for me, like where I'm like doing some like art production and stuff, and like in a lot of places I'm the matchmaker, like that my value can't be the matchmaking anymore. Like, so with that in the NFT space, so I think like the marketplaces, whether it's like the Clubhouse or the Maker's Place or the OpenSea, like how do you see that playing out as far as artists, you know, really having their own autonomy over people? Like what marketplaces do you feel like are doing the best? And do you feel like there's going to be a play for that whole gallery concept to, I don't know if like...
No, I think curation and representation will be things that people always enjoy. I don't think that these things are going to go away. I definitely think people are still going to be, going to want to be represented by people who are respected in the space. And the art of curation is its own art, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding how the semantics of things and then how they relate to each other and how those semantic relationships can create an experience for people. That's not going to go away.
So you still feel like there's a clear value between like launching on something like Foundation where it's like it's exclusive, you need an invite. There's still a clear value between doing that and doing OpenSea where anyone can go post a thing. Like you still think value can be communicated.
I think that I will say that I know the folks at Foundation, and part of their exclusivity right now is just the fact that they need to be able to have quality control on their own end, right? If they can't take in everybody, because right now they don't have the framework to do that, and they're working on that. But I mean, this is why we see a lot of issues with OpenSea. Mm-hmm. OpenSea does have this thing where anybody can get on, and they also don't have the
there's
framework.
Quality issues and
there's quality issues, right? I mean, OpenSea this is not trash talking OpenSea. Right. They've done a lot of things to rise to who they are. The people chose OpenSea because OpenSea obviously wasn't the only marketplace that you could jump on. The people chose OpenSea, and that's how it's been able to become what it's become. But in saying that, and they've had all these things that have drawn so many people. Now they have the issue of so many people, right? But I think we'll start to see the exclusivity aspect move away because this community is not really rooted in that. Like exclusivity doesn't have the same type of value. Scarcity does, but exclusivity does not necessarily represent scarcity, right? Exclusivity represents gatekeeping, right? It represents someone having the ability to close and open doors. So
that was the word I was looking for. Is like, do you think there's going to still have that gatekeeping element?
I don't think that it can survive. This is why I say that companies are going to have to restructure the way they think about collaboration and integration because they don't speak the language very well yet, right? This is foreign. This approach to working with and collaborating with people outside of the organization, this is new for them. And whereas like in the Web3 space, this has been for the total existence of it, this has kind of been what it's been about, right? This is why people, this space came out of a necessity. There was a need for it. And so what we're seeing is companies going, all right, well, we're not as needed anymore, but we need, we still need to exist. Like, how do we come into the space? Right. So one of the people I always refer to as who did it really well was Keith Grossman with Time Magazine. Keith Grossman, if you were in Clubhouse in the early days, Keith was in there with us. Keith was in there in the very beginning, and this is the president of Time Magazine. And he was in there just like anybody else. There was no status. There was no nothing. He was just in there talking with us. He was in there helping build where the community is today. And now we look at like the Timepieces collection. We've seen all the ways in which Time magazine was able to do things at Art Basel and also at in NFT and NYC. He did it perfectly, in my opinion. He did it perfectly. There are other companies like, Nike's and Adidas they've had their eyes on this space for a while. They've been working on things to solidify their entry into the space for a while. But to me, Keith Grossman was like the most organic one. And this is why Keith Grossman can come into a room and have the utmost trust, the utmost respect. People want him there. People listen to him and they want to work with him because he has brought Time into the space as a true community member. And not someone who's just looking to come into the community. He's been there and he's brought Time along with him to like build the community itself. So his hands are as dirty and beat up as the rest of ours because he's been in the soil with us from the very beginning, helping like plant the seeds for this. So when you look at Keith Grossman, who is, like I said, this is a very big deal. He's the president of Time magazine, right? When you look at him, you don't see the president of Time magazine. You see Keith Grossman. You see Keith. And I think that's really important because so much about this space is like leveling the playing field, removing hierarchical structures and making everything flat like this table. And we can all exist on this table together and stand as human beings. And we can give each other the same respect as human beings, right? And anyone can move where they want on this table and interact with anybody they want to on this table. They don't have to like walk up the steps to get there. They don't have to go through this person to get to that person. Like it can be so organic. There's still the same relationships that we have as human beings because we bring the human element into the technology. But it's so new and the culture has kind of like gotten this push start from a space of like we want equity, we want sovereignty, we want to get rid of so much of this bullshit. And
I have a thought about this is one of my meditations, of being locked away in the pandemic while being creative and coming up with whatever business model. I'm of the belief that technology progress is going to make it so that the artist has to be well understood and they have to be inspired and excited about developing business models as much as they are developing pieces and telling stories. I feel like the day of the artist being ignorant of business and blaming it on being an artist is over.
Yeah, I mean, like if you don't come into this space, not even if you don't come into this space, if you release projects and you don't have an idea about how business works, and by business I mean the psychology of making human beings want to purchase things and making human beings want to interact with things, and of
supply and demand,
100%.
And all those basics.
Supply and demand is, and this goes back to the conversation about where do you want to release your pieces, right? You will see people all the time release editions, but they don't have the demand that justifies that supply. Right? Or you'll see people release one-of-ones with no concept of what a floor price is. And so they move around their floor prices with no actual idea about why they're doing it. With no intention and unknowingly creating a less attractive space for a collector to want to move into. If I purchase your work at 1 ETH, right, and then you randomly sell a piece of the same quality for half that, for 0.2 ETH. Well, you've lowered the value a bit of what I've purchased it at. I want to continue to watch the floor go up, right? And so, one of the things that I always try to tell people who want to enter the space, whether they want to be collectors, whether they want to be artists, or both, technologists, whatever they're trying to do, right? Because there are people who are coming into the space to figure out how to build technology that better serves the members of the community. But I always say, just come here and do nothing but pay attention.
Show up and listen.
Show up and listen. Don't try to sell anything. Don't try to release anything. Don't try to build anything. If the only thing you should be trying to build is community and relationships. And if you do that, when you do put out this thing that you're passionate about,
Yes.
It's gonna go so much better because this one of the best examples of how to like absorb the knowledge about NFTs in the space and Web3 in general is to look at it like a language, right? And if I want to learn how to speak a language,
Sure.
I can 100% take a class. I can get Rosetta Stone and just
go see the people, right?
But if I go to that country, right, and I'm there for a year and I can't ask where the bathroom is, or I can't order myself things to eat, or get directions to the hospital or whatever, like it means something when we're doing the thing versus when we're just like taking it. So when we get to interact with something, and it's immersion, right? When you're immersed in something, your relationship to the things that you learn is different, and your brain records it differently. And so the NFT space is no different. If you come and you get immersed in it, you start to learn how to speak the language.
Sure.
And through language, we learn about how to dance, and we learn how to cook, and we learn all the things, right? We learn how to communicate inside that particular culture. If you can't communicate inside the culture because you don't speak the language, you're not going to be able to collect things properly. You're not going to be able to sell things properly. You're not going to be able to build any technology that properly or adequately reflects the need of that community. And so that's like the biggest thing is that you just come here and you just get all this free knowledge. You're going to do really well.
But here's another thing. You know, as baffled as people are about the NFT product and why there's a market, why there's exchange happening here. Before NFTs, people were baffled at why people buy paintings.
Yeah.
People were baffled at, holy shit, a fucking sculpture just sold, you know, a piece of clay, a lump of clay just sold for, you know, $100,000 in New York City. Why? I don't understand that. Like there's a bunch of people that just don't. It's funny because I was having a conversation with my dad, and he's a very smart person. So he was speaking out loud of his, you know, ignorance of NFTs and the blockchain and why his misunderstanding of the value play. But again, him being a smart person, he also was communicating out loud that gold, for everything that it's useful for, there's at least 2 or 3 things that are better at that. And the only reason why we are attached to it, the only reason why, you know, all of us have a chain around our neck is because it's attachment to the wealthy and the powerful and the people that communicate value in their communities. You know? We've chosen it. Yeah. Exactly. The fact that human attention focused on this thing, which for thousands of years people made spoons out of, you know, and if you ate off a spoon that was made of this stuff, you knew that you're in presence of value, you know? So this communication of value is such a human thing, you know? And what the revolution is right now is, as artists, we can artificially create a scarce product, a rare product.
We're manufacturing
right out of our imaginations. You know, I could just create gold. You know, it's alchemy, full speed ahead. You know, just dropped on us, and it's just like it's just a matter of putting it out there and effectively communicating the value of your visions. You know?
Well, the thing is too is that we have always been able to do that, right? I always say, like, if you're an artist, you have like a superpower.
Yes.
I explain it to my daughter. My oldest is very artistic.
Yes.
And I try to remind her, like, you were able to take emotions inside your body. You can take them out and you can put them somewhere and make other people feel them. That's like you can be like part of the X-Men if you want, right? We've always been able to do this, right? Like, this is the magic of art. But there's always been someone to say, yeah, but I can see it's gold. You know it's gold. But all those people out there don't know it's gold, and I can make them know it's gold.
Right.
So but that person is now being dissolved in this community. That person is going away because I can say, yeah, I know it's gold, and guess what? The community now knows it's gold without anyone else telling them.
Yes.
Because of their relationship with me. But yeah, I mean, I was using that. It's funny you mentioned gold because I was talking to someone on Instagram today who's apprehensive right now, kind of like, well, I don't quite get it. How is it truly unlimited, et cetera, et cetera? Like, how are these things not unlimited, right? Like, how are these things? I'm trying to explain to them some of the fundamental principles of blockchain technology and why that allows us to set a price on something that could potentially be, not price, but a quantity on something that could be potentially unlimited. How we can make it limited because of the blockchain, right? But I was using the example of gold, and you have to think about supply and demand, right? If there was something that landed on Earth and just like tripled the amount of gold that we had access to, the price of gold would change.
Yes.
Right? Because the supply of gold has now changed.
Exactly.
Or if we found something that was just infinitely more valuable, maybe that would also change. More valuable but more scarce, maybe that would change the price of gold, right? So these things, we human beings have always manufactured that. This is one of the like sustaining principles of capitalism is the fact that supply and demand.
That's why there's tons and tons of diamonds that'll just never see the light of day.
Never.
Yes.
Right? If we can control that supply, we have an ability to sort of like interact with demand in with some sort of partnership, right? And so we as human beings, just especially those of us who live in like capitalistic run societies or dominant societies, we understand that if there's only a couple of things, I have to pay more to get it. Right. I have to pay more to get it. Who wrote that rule? Right. Yes. Who wrote the rule that if there's only a few things that the people who do purchase them have to pay more? No one. I mean, this is just the way that we interact with things as human beings. And so I think this will be very interesting. But there's so many principles that come from all these other markets and these worlds that we've already seen. And then there's this ability to sort of like reshape and redefine how we interact with those ideas in this space. And that's probably that's what's gotten a lot of people interested. Also, a lot of people interested because there's been a lot of money flowing back and forth, right? We are watching people who've put money into things like Ethereum very early, and who've been in the crypto space very early, who've become very, very wealthy. Yeah. So to them, $1 doesn't represent $1 in the same way that it does for the rest of us, right? And so we have a huge influx of people who've been able to make a lot of money, and they want to put that money back into this network, this market, and pull some money back out, right? So we're watching people. I'm sure people from the outside are hearing about the numbers, and they're like, I always put my doodle up on Instagram and I go, I bought this thing. It was very scary to buy this thing. I bought it for too much money. I bought it for like $3,200, right? For this JPEG of a doodle.
Yeah, I just bought a picture.
I just bought this
$3,000.
$3,200 I bought this for, right? Well, now that thing has been worth up to $40,000. Yeah. The floor price of it. So that's not even just what mine was worth. That was just like the cheapest you could get of that. That's between October and now. Yeah. Right. So when I break it down to people like that, they're like, oh, okay, well, I got to get involved. I want to know how to do that. And so I think there is a draw that people see there's money to be made. Sure. Especially as artists. Yeah. Artists, we have, historically been one of those groups that has produced things for a low amount of money and watched it like sell for astronomical amounts of money. Yeah. Or we've taken part in, projects or campaigns and things like that have made just, boatloads of money, and we've been paid a very fixed and small amount. And so now you have this thing where as an artist, I can come through and I can make $100,000 off of a project. I have a handful of people I know, a handful of friends who've become millionaires over the last 12 months as artists.
Well, let's talk for a second about the bubble. We're clearly riding in a situation where most of these projects, I'm definitely going to guess like 97% of the NFT projects that are out there right now selling for thousands of dollars are going to drop, and I do get a sense as I'm going from project to project and even going from marketplace to marketplace, and I'm recognizing that there's a bit of predatory behavior. Oh yeah. There's a bit of like, let's go in and let's create this thing and then let's get these people's money and get out of here.
It's called a rug, right? We've watched just straight up rugs happen. Yeah. This is not unique to the NFT space, right? We watch rugs happen in crypto. Sure. There's plenty of examples of rugs happening in the real estate market. There's rugs happening in the stock market, right? But yeah, I think that one of my key points of when I'm onboarding people is to let them understand that this is a highly volatile market with very low liquidity, right? There may come a day where my doodle that's worth whatever X, Y, and Z, worth like 9 ETH right now. I can't sell it. No one wants it.
Exactly.
Right. And so what's unique about the NFT market is like it's a market built on top of it's a volatile market built on top of a volatile market. Right. And as you go up, right. So from crypto, which is fairly liquid now, like crypto is pretty liquid. There's coins where you probably get them and you won't be able to sell them. But you could, for the most part, the market is as such, you can continue to trade those coins and tokens inside that market. Then you go to the NFT space. I'd be lying if I said there's not a couple PFPs sitting in my wallet right now that there's no one who wants to buy them. Right. And so that's just the nature of it. Right. It's like there's this low liquidity and it's volatile. And so you have these two markets sort of playing around with each other. So, anyone who's paying attention to cryptocurrency right now, like Ethereum is gone. It's been halved.
Yes.
Right. Not the first time. It won't be the last time.
Sure.
I've been around with Ethereum for long enough to remember when it's been worse, way worse than this.
Yeah.
But I've also been around long enough to know like it just fluctuates. It drops, it comes back. It drops, it comes back. And every time I watch it drop, it comes back and it goes a little bit higher, right? So the drops just aren't as much. But you have that on top of now the value of the collectible or the art piece that you own is also going to fluctuate. So these are like two markets like stacked on top of each other, which can make for some real scary moments for folks. But when I'm on board to say, don't put anything here that you can't lose. Your rent money, grocery money shouldn't be here. Your life savings shouldn't be here, and if you can help people have healthy relationships with the way that they're investing, some of it's investment, some of it's gamble. Right. Yeah. Some of I told people, I put out a tweet some weeks back. I bought this PFP and, I saw the people, they were like, oh, you bought this, I'm going to get this. I'm like, look, I love Vegas.
Yeah,
I enjoy a good lotto scratcher from time to time. I will, I'll go and get the randomized numbers on the Mega Millions sometimes.
Yeah,
I like to gamble. I gamble responsibly. I don't put money that I can't afford to lose there.
Yeah.
But you have to be okay with anything you put in this market going to zero.
Yeah, because
that's a real reality, right? And so I think if you onboard people with that, and you kind of stay on them and remind them, right, like. Right now, this is a bubble. And, I don't know. I've heard numbers like that before, like 90 to 95% of the projects won't be worth anything. I don't think so.
I'm scrolling through, just scrolling through Instagram and scrolling through the NFT hashtag and seeing, like, okay, somebody's dropping a collection of drafts.
Well, yeah.
Somebody's dropping a collection of, sleepy snails.
Well, you see all the derivatives and things like that. Okay. I do think that there will be some built-in value in this current time because these are going to be, like, the archetype projects, right? These are going to be things that if we look back 20 years from now, you'd be like, oh, you got like this thing from 2020 or 2021. Right. But in saying that, there are going to be a lot of projects that are going to not be worth nearly as much, especially if people are buying these things at 14 grand, 18 grand a pop. They're not going to be worth that. Not going to sustain.
Yeah, some of these projects are like in 20 years, it's going to be like finding... It's going to be like finding a garbage pail kid in your friend's basement. Yeah. You're like, oh, wow, you got one of those. And
there's going to be built-in value because of the timing that they came out, right?
Perhaps,
right? Exactly. But as years go on, that becomes less and the value of that thing becomes less and less, right? But I do agree, there are going to be a lot of projects that are not going to be worth much.
Well, one tip that I have, and this is partially a sales pitch for what I'm working on with Olgaruth, focus on finding an artist who's busting their ass and working on shit before NFTs were a conversation.
Yes.
Follow somebody who is going to who has the evidence that they're going to be creating something and building upon their creations and building their brand and again, has a solid relationship with their business model, has a solid relationship with the value that they're contributing to culture, and they're expressing that, in a very well understood way, when it comes to whatever project that is that they're dropping. I think again, there is. I don't know, like to me, it's the same as why would you go into a gallery, why would a collector go into a gallery and drop $20,000 on a painting? the collectors are not stupid. Like there is a thought process. There is a bit of research that they do. There is a getting to know the artist and getting to understand, okay, like, yeah, I was just thinking about the idea of like a friend of mine who collects pieces, and they were like sort of referring to like, I would never sell, I want to hold on to these pieces. And from my point of view, like I love the idea that somebody buys, whether it's an Olgaruth token or whether it's an original of mine or whether I love the idea that somebody buys one to hold on to and buys another one because they want to sell it at some point because they believe in me.
Yeah, that's kind of my process too, right? Like I hate that I only bought one doodle, right? I mean, I spent a lot of money on that doodle at the time, right? So it was like not something I was comfortable like dropping 2 ETH. I bought my doodle for 0.9 ETH,
sure,
which at the time was like $3,200. But if I ever decide to pull my equity out of that project and sell, like out of this community that I really enjoy, right? And that's part of the thing too, is like some of these, some PFPs are just like, they're nothing, right? They're just, hey, let's just make 10,000 of this thing, but there's no real community behind it, or, it's an attempt at a rug pull. But there are other ones that do, like the community's really rich. The Discord, the Discord servers, you're meeting people, you're building relationships, you can go to events, you can do, do all these things. This is what I love about, I'm not a BAYC member, but I love the fact that what they did was they redefined the expectations for what we, what do people want, being part of or collecting a PFP.
It's such a great example of like again, seeing the apes out there, and you're just like, okay, these art pieces, they're pretty cool. But yeah, going to the site and really scrolling through and developing an understanding, it definitely inspired us as we're like planning on what to do with Olgaruth tokens and how we're going to, again, communicate value to the community that decides to give us our attention.
So Josh, why don't you tell us about Olgaruth? What are you building?
I mean, yeah.
Give us the quick synopsis and then the long synopsis.
Quicks, I'll keep it medium, and combine it together. But yeah, like did I sort of explain that I've been?
Not today.
Not so today? I feel like I've said it enough.
We might have to take this clip and put it at the beginning of this whole thing, but tell us a little bit about what you're building.
So yeah, I had a question to myself, like, what is going to, I want to be a weird old dude, in a couple decades that has a bunch of people traveling from all around the world and writing, 5 to 7 digit checks, to my studio for collecting originals. And what is going to make that happen? And the answer that I came up with is intellectual property. I have to come up with my version of Disney, my version of Marvel Comics, my version of Adult Swim, my version of a world, wherewith ideas and characters and relationships and problems and solutions, and just stories exist, that people tap into, see pieces of themselves, and therefore want a piece from my studio, because of that relationship. So I needed to get away from client-based work, and ultimately the pandemic created that opportunity. So I dove into the studio and like immediately just started looking at all my work and pointing at this character in this painting, this character in this drawing, this character in the mural over here, this character in this mural, this character from a piece 8 years ago, and giving them names and giving them relationships and giving them a place that they live. And the place is the city of Olgaruth, and Olgar is my father's mother's name. Ruth is my mother's name. So I combined their names together to create this city with 31 districts, culture burgeoning, lots of curiosity and lots of vision, that exists in this place. And I'm writing stories that are attached to that. And yeah, ultimately it was going to be, like I was talking to Trent, like we first met and he was like trying to put me on a project, and I'm like, this is what I'm doing.
I was like, paint this building.
You're like, come paint this building. I'm like, no, this is what I'm doing, and I want you to help. And you're like, oh shit. I'm building this place, and I want to create something that ultimately is a proposal to Netflix, ultimately is a proposal to Rockstar Games, and something that spreads out there. And once I develop that funnel, I develop that model, I want to, because I know other painters like in studios in Oakland who can go right down that funnel and bring them in next as a proposal to Netflix, or a proposal for a dope ass video game, or a proposal for this, that, or whatever. I really I want significant checks to be written to these art studios, including mine. I want a $1 million check to go to this man's studio and this woman's studio, and have. There's no reason why the Bay Area, with the amount of vision that it contains, is not competing with Hollywood in terms of being a visionary capital, within this place of technological breakthrough, tech industry, of progressive culture, of just a place that, even like thinking about festival culture and Burning Man, like, people love to spend money on weird ass shit, weird ass visionary ideas
that they can be a part of, right? Like that they can participate.
Exactly.
And not just like have like coming at them, but like
exactly
this back the symbiotic relationship with the universe, if you will.
Exactly. So the idea that, even as I was mentioning before, the artists becoming more tuned in to the value of their visions, more tuned in to getting creative about the business model, getting creative about, these concepts that I created with this series of sculptures, these ideas that I was exploring with this series of photographs, these concepts that I was exploring, and these conversations that I was having while making this series of drawings, I can actually turn it into this value exchange, turn it into a ton of sustainability coming into my studio. I can turn my studio into an institution where people are coming to me and proposing the next idea that really brings wealth into the community and brings sustainability. Yeah, I want sustainability to stop being a bad word with artists, or I want wealth to stop being a bad word with artists. I want, when I die, I want that to be a thing that's just, that's another meditation that I've been having, like during the pandemic, is I definitely feel like this relationship that the artist has with the business model, this idea that for whatever reason, the work of an artist who is more ignorant of their business perspective is purer than the artist that is tuned in. Like that to me is an artificial creation the more that I think about it, because there's no other business model. There's no plumber going out there saying, I just do it for the money. I mean, I just do it for the love. It's not about the money. I really like toilets.
Well, it's just such an interesting relationship that artists have developed with that. I think it's like a coping mechanism as well, because you should be able to create, whether you were going to make $1 on it or not, right? Like in order to create good art, you need to be able to do so unimpacted by the monetary value, or like what you're going to get out of it financially.
Well, I agree. I will say that that's one of the main differences of the artist business model of any other, is that for a period of time, you have to not think about money at all. You have to dive in and just be absolutely selfish and please your inner children and please yourself and come up with something that just fills you with joy and inspiration, and that takes, first you have to develop technique.
I don't think that the two have to be estranged from each other, right? I just think that in the creation of art, if you are creating art to make money, then you compartmentalize
Sure.
that, like that part of the road, if you will, right? Or you compartmentalize that part of the process. So this part of the process where I'm creating my art is unimpacted by money, right? I'm not thinking about the financial side of it.
Sure.
I'm creating from some really pure place, space inside myself. I'm creating art.
Yes.
Now we're done with that process, right? We've created the asset, we've created the work, we've created the art.
Yes.
Now the other part of that is, well, I want to sell my art and make money off it, and then now you can interact with this really pure thing with some sort of like strategy.
Exactly.
Right, like this is the best way to get the people who are going to interact the most with this and have the best interaction with this. This is the way to get it to those people. So like the two can exist, but we're told that like as artists, like you just no, just create to create. I am creating to create, but I can also build something on top of the things I've created. To now get those creations out to people. They don't have to be these two polar opposite.
Well, there doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship between the people that do it as a business and the people that don't. There are people that love to work on cars and they're just working and tinkering away at a car right now. They don't talk shit about the person that owns the auto shop down the street that's paying for oil changes. And
I dare say, if you commit enough time, love, and just like effort into a thing, if you love it enough, I think anything could be an art, right? Yeah. You watch a mathematician, right? That's an art. You watch that super talented person working on a car that can make like something out of nothing.
Sure.
Right. These are artists. It's the same, way in which we access the brain to do things that other people can't even see.
Sure.
That I believe kind of makes something an art, right? The way you can express yourself and the way that, this really unique part of yourself that other people just don't have can relate to the real, into the real world, I think becomes an art. But yeah, this is going to be a beautiful, Web3 will be beautiful because people will be able to start strip that idea away. That to be an artist, I either need to ride on someone else's boat or I need to be okay with not making like any money for my work and being poor and not being able to like pay my bills or have healthcare or purchase a home and all these things that come up.
I think to step out of my moderator role for a second, and we'll close up soon, but I think like the idea, like to build off what Josh was saying, like the idea of art has been so this myth of the starving artist has been so conflated to like poor people make art and then really rich people can sometimes buy it. And if you get really lucky, the really rich people find you really poor person, you might be like an average person you can like eat. Yeah. But I think like there's something to be said for this whole Web3 space where again, even now in like the contemporary world, like we all know artists who are extremely successful financially, but it's like for the most part, those artists I know is because they have like an influx of wealthy collectors or wealthy brands or wealthy developers or whatever, right? So like our whole focus has been on that, where I think with this Web3 space, not only like that's why we love like, people, there's a whole wave of like micro buying stocks, like because now, and this is relatively recent, like, someone can't just go buy Berkshire Hathaway because it costs $200,000, but now with a Robinhood, you can go buy $20 of it, right? So I feel like there's something to be said for like the NFT space. I think is really allowing artists to go public. That's really what it is. It's like we're creating a stock market for artists, and then now it's like not only are we creating a stock market for artists, but you don't have to be Picasso to be traded publicly, and it can be affordable to get in on that. Like if you're part of a community at the beginning, like it's not just rich people who are buying NFTs. They're like people, like you can come be a part of my project as an average person and you can become rich off me becoming rich. And I think like that's where the community element I think is like super beneficial to artists, and that's what makes me excited about it. But
well, you can have direct access to your market in ways that have not been available before, and
you don't need anyone to bring that. You don't need anyone to bring you to a market. You can bring yourself to a market, and that's a really incredible ability that this space offers.
Yeah, the more tuned in that we are, again, as artists to the value of our visions and recognizing that you're going to get more successful when you get good at communicating the value of your visions, understanding and communicating that. If somebody came to your show or you just had an opening and nobody bought anything, it's because you did not successfully communicate the value of your visions. Go back to the drawing board.
Right? Like I think about
don't be butthurt about it. Go back to the drawing board and keep loving your work, keep painting, but recognize that that's
A part
the
of it.
language.
Yeah.
That's
You have
the
to
language
connect
barrier that you're
with
having.
people. You have to connect with people.
know.
Like my first couple, like my Genesis pieces on Foundation, didn't go anywhere. Right, I released those in June of 2020. They didn't move.
Yes.
And I always tell people my story is I was in the space in December 2020. It took me a year
Yeah.
to sell anything.
Yes.
But when my last collection, Moments of Solitude, came out in December, and within 14 days, I sold about almost $50,000 worth of photography from like 12 images. Right, and so it was a lot more intentional. There was story built into it.
Yes.
There was community built into it, right? So before I had even released the collection, I was already talking to people. We were in shows. We were having conversations about what the true story was. It was allowing people to build a connection to the work.
Yes.
It was allowing me to communicate the story behind the work, and there was a completely different interaction with that than it had been with my previous work. And then through that, people were also able to interact with some of my previous work that I had released.
Yes.
But that collection, 100%, within 14 days. More than half that collection was gone, and by some really, really big and respected collectors inside the space.
Yeah.
And so, you have to understand that element. Not everybody is a speaker, right?
Yes.
Not everybody is.
Yeah.
We do plenty of introverts in the space.
Sure.
But one of the big things is like there are ways to communicate without like stepping on the stage and like getting in front of a mic.
Sure.
There are ways to communicate. There are ways to build, right? Some people build on Discord. Some people get in Discord and that's their bread and butter. Some people build in spaces, like the Twitter spaces, Clubhouse. There's all different types of ways to build in this space. And I think you have to find the lane that's best for you to communicate with other people. Because without that, there are exceptions to the rule, 100%.
Sure.
But without that, most people inside the space are going to be lacking. So that's the best advice I can have. I always tell people to come in here, chill, see what it looks like, and start building relationships and building community. But do so authentically. Don't do it.
Absolutely.
People can tell if it's a sales pitch, and people can feel if they're being chill.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Come in here and really build some relationships, and you will be better for it.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel like one more thing.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was gonna say in closing, why don't we like tell us real quick where can we find more of what you were working on, and then Joshua will do a little plug for you, and maybe you give a piece of advice too, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, perfect. So currently, almost all my work is on Foundation. There's still a couple pieces from the collection Moments in Solitude that are still listed on Foundation. I don't really have much on OpenSea. Again, I'm looking at Solana as one of the next chains I'm going to do a photography collection on. And then I have a series of paintings that I'll be putting out. Those will probably be one-on-ones as well on Foundation.
Good stuff.
But yeah, just never too sold on the exchange. I just try to get the work out and see where it goes from there.
You're on Instagram as Rough Draft?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Rough Draft. On Twitter as Rough Draft. I think it's Rough_Draft. I do a Photo Friday photography show with my host, John Knopf, who's a really amazing community builder inside the space. Recently was all over the Twitter metaverse news. What's named for selling his Bored Ape for 1.3 million. Incredible photographer. He sold pieces up to I think like 23 ETH, which at one point was like the highest bit of photography sold. He's helped organize. He helped organize the largest NFT photography gallery space to date for Art Basel, which was me and several other colleagues that we had photos up in that. So I do that with him on Fridays. I also am part of a show called On the Chain with an incredible creative Ed Balloon out of Los Angeles and a really talented young creative who creates amazing work. She's here out of Oakland, actually. We didn't even know that we were both here in Oakland until we came together to host this show. So we host that show on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sunday. And just staying active in the space had been wanting to do a show for a while. And this show just sort of like came together. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And obviously this space creates an opportunity to just kind of be infinitely creative and explore infinite avenues. So it's really more about narrowing down, what you're passionate about at the moment and figuring out how maybe that'll build into other pathways later.
Wonderful. Joshua, where can we find your stuff? And you have one more comment?
What was I thinking? Well, I had a thing that I wrote down. I have a Twitter account, but instead of actually tweeting, I just have a folder called Tweetables. And and the thought was, life is just a pattern of expressions and negotiations. And we're expressing to make our negotiations more effective while also negotiating to make our expressions more effective. So whatever value that provides, but that just popped into my head, you know. Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Joshua Mays Art. I just created an Instagram for Olgaruth City. So look up Olgaruth City and follow that. Olgaruth.com, JoshuaMaysArt.com. And yeah, stay tuned for creating Twitter Spaces, the Discord of launching this Olgaruth token project and bringing people into the city of Olgaruth and taking y'all on a trip.
Looking forward to it, man.
Thanks for watching. Thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, man. This was wonderful.
Cool. That's a wrap.
Cool.